When we're solving quadratics or solving things that are 0 equals some x squared value, a parabola, there's really 3 ways we can solve it. Now, we've looked at solving by graphing, which is the first way, which is probably the longest way to do it because you actually have to go through the issue of graphing. You can also solve by factoring. And then you can solve by completing the square and rearranging. Completing the square and rearranging. And the last way, so those are the 3 that we've done or we should know how to do. The last way is actually using what's called the quadratic formula. Now, the quadratic formula is derived from completing the square of our standard form formula and then just using that to solve for x. If you want to see the proof, we're going to post that on our Google Classroom. But for now, what we have to recognize is that the quadratic formula is equal to x, or we have x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Now, this allows us to have more than one answer because we have that plus or minus. When we put the square root in, we have to assume that it could be positive or it could be negative. So we do this when we can't factor a question. If we're stuck on factoring for, let's say, 2 or 3 minutes, or we look at it and we know it doesn't factor, this should be your next method. You should use the quadratic formula. So looking at this, if I look at this equation, I can't figure out what the factor is. I don't know what it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to say x equals, and I'll write the formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then we're just going to sub in all our values. So we get negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 9 squared minus 4 times 2 times 6 all divided by 2 times 2. Now, when we're doing these questions, a lot of the time you're going to look and you're going to have numbers that you can easily multiply. The thing that we have to be careful with is under the square root, if the a or the c value are negative, we're actually adding those values, not subtracting. So in this case, though, they're not. So we get negative 9 plus or minus. Now the square root of, the square of 9 is going to give me 81. 4 times 2 is 8 times 6 is 48. So we get that there. And then we have over 4. And then we're going to simplify that to x equals negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81 minus 48, which gives me 33, all divided by 4. And that would be my final answer. Okay, that shows that there's 2 solutions. I can't reduce that root 33. We would want to reduce that if we could. We can't reduce that right now. For most of you, we're not going to address the reducing because some of your calculators do it and some don't. But this would be your final answer. It shows me that there's root 9 plus. So the 2 answers would be x equals negative 9 plus root 33 over 4, or x equals negative 9 minus root 33 over 4. Okay, moving on to the next one. We've got this. So the first thing we need to do is always rearrange so that we have everything on one side of the formula. Okay, here, so let's do the quadratic formula. So we can't factor that, or if we can, it might be difficult. So we're just going to use the quadratic formula. Okay, so we get, I'm not going to write it out again. We get negative 12. I'll put that in, plus or minus the square root of negative 12 squared minus 4 times 4 times 9, all divided by 2 times 4. Now, underneath that square root, the first thing that happens is the 2 negatives make this positive. We should never have a negative value right here. okay? Because negative 12 times negative 12 is positive 144. A common mistake would be to write negative 144 minus, what's that, 72. Okay, so, or not 72, 16 times 9, excuse me, 144, okay? That's not right. This negative doesn't exist, okay? Because negative and a negative make a positive. So this is going to be 144 minus 144, all divided by 8. Well, 144 over 144, that's just going to give me 0. So we're going to 12 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 8. That doesn't, that's 0. The square root of 0 is 0. So plus or minus 0 doesn't change anything. So here, our answer would just be x equals 12 over 8. And we can reduce that, divide them both by 4, and we get 3 over 2. Okay? You probably could have factored that one as well. And then finally, if we did this question, we're going to get x equals negative, and we've got again negative 4, plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 7, all divided by 2a, which is 2 times 1. So then we get positive 4 plus or minus the square root of 16. And now 4 times 7 is going to give us an issue, because 16 minus 28 is giving us a negative value. If we get to this point, so we're going to get 16 minus 28, we get negative 12 over 2. We can't do that. And here you could say, therefore, no solutions. Because you can't take the square root of a negative value. But you do have to be careful that underneath that square root symbol, you've actually done the algebra correctly, because one of the most common mistakes is getting a negative value when it's not negative.